John Pozza on the podcast today. He is the chairman of the Brookville High School Hall of Fame Committee. John, good to have you on the show.
Good to be here, Rich. Thank you.
And we've talked about this great, this started back in 2018. There's 25 members. We'll get to listing who's actually on this Hall of Fame. But the important thing here is to let our certainly, well, I guess anybody on who you have a deadline coming up. Explain what kind of the point of action we're talking about here before we get into that.
Sure, Rich. Well, first of all, we accept nominations for the Hall of Fame throughout the year. But we have to set a deadline for the particular year that we're in, that we're going to accept the nominations for that year. The deadline to submit a nomination is August 1st. So there's two ways that you can nominate someone for the Hall of Fame. The easiest way is to go on the school district's website, which is www.basd.us. And once you're on the main menu there, just go directly to the actual menu because there'll be other links. Hit the menu and then type in Hall of Fame in the space bar. And when you do that, you will see it'll show you the criteria for being able to be in the Hall of Fame. And then there's like an online nomination form. Okay, that's the one you would use to submit it online. So we immediately receive it. The committee does. That's the easiest way to do it. There's another way to do it, and that is to just print out. There's another link in that menu. You can print out the hard copy of the nomination form and do it by hand, and then send it to the Brookville Area High School Hall of Fame, P.O. Box 41, Brookville, PA 15825, P.O. Box 41. So either way, whichever is easiest for you, that's the way you can do it. But the key is August 1st as the deadline for this year.
I really have enjoyed how this Hall of Fame has grown, John. And I'll be honest, I've never heard of a Hall of Fame that is not sports oriented. But once this got going, I quickly realized this is going to work. Explain how this kind of originated and how cool or how neat is it to see all these people kind of come out of nowhere, but how you've discovered yourself, and me too, on some of these, on how worthy they are of getting mentioned as a Hall of Famer, not sports oriented necessarily.
Sure. Well, I was on the school board at the time in 2018. And right. It was my idea to start an ad hoc committee to see if we could actually start this process for establishing a Hall of Fame. And of course, I got the blessing of the school board. And what I did was I started investigating how other schools did it. And, each had their own little ways of setting up their halls of fame. And the one that I liked the best, which this Hall of Fame is patterned after, is the one at Franklin Area School District in Venango County, which is not far from us. Mm-hmm. And they honored, it's a kind of a combination of sports and an all-inclusive Hall of Fame. Because like us, if every year that we've had this Hall of Fame, pretty much, we have had someone that's gotten in a lot of times for their sports backgrounds and accomplishments. So, and years ago, I remember Brookville did have a sports Hall of Fame.
Right.
And as I'm finding out, a lot of the people we have in this Hall of Fame were in that Hall of Fame. Right. When it was started. So we got the go ahead, and that's kind of where we are right now.
So you have to be a Brookville Area High School graduate. That's really the number one, the number one filter, right?
No, actually, you do not have to be a graduate. That's probably a misnomer. Most of our people are graduates, but if you worked at the school, if you were a teacher, or if you volunteered, even if you volunteered, you could be in the Hall of Fame. But you had to have had that involvement to some extent with the school. And the criteria that a lot of people may not be aware of is, say like you're a graduate and you want to nominate a graduate, they have to be at least 10 years graduated and out of school to be qualified to be a candidate. And then if you're a volunteer, you have to not be volunteering for at least 5 years since the last time you were on, that
Right.
you were whatever you were volunteering for. So we know that we have plenty of viable candidates in the future, some of which are still volunteering at the school, and they will have their chance to be nominated. But a lot of us, we depend on people nominating. This year is one of our best years in terms of nominations.
Oh,
We
good.
actually have 14 to this date. We have 14 nominees, three of which are holdovers that were nominated in the past.
Right.
Now, you can be nominated and you will remain a nominee if you were not selected for the given year that you were nominated for. You will stay on for 3 years. That doesn't mean that you can't be, after 3 years, nominated again. You can still be nominated at any time,
Okay.
even after the 3 years. But once you're nominated for that window, we don't even have to, we're still going to consider that individual to be, selected and to be a nominee.
You've been embedded in this community a long time, John. You're not a Brookville grad, but you have really embraced this. Obviously, if anybody's been to any of these ceremonies, which kind of, well, and first of all, speaking of the ceremony, that is when this fall, after this class is announced.
Yes. And Rich, you're very familiar. I mean, Rich actually served as a person that was presenting. I think a
Right.
couple of times you actually
Yeah.
presented at the actual ceremony. And it is truly a heartwarming experience
Oh,
listening to the testimonials of the folks, not only by the person presenting them, but to the person being the inductee themselves and their
right.
backgrounds and why it was so special. That was also going back to why I wanted to do this, because I think we really needed to honor Brookville's best and brightest and recognize them, because I think it sets an example for the kids that are in school now of what they can achieve as well. Especially if they're interested in something in the backgrounds of those inductees,
Yeah.
they can say to themselves, wow, this is how they did it. I want to be able to do the same thing and be successful. So that's the whole thing behind this Hall of Fame.
When's the ceremony this fall, John? It's wrapped around it's part of the homecoming weekend, right?
It's always part of homecoming. It's actually the induction ceremony is the day before the homecoming football game. So it's always on a Thursday. And now we've got it so that it's part of the school day. It's at generally at 1:30, between 1:15 and 1:30 on that Thursday afternoon before the homecoming football game. Um, and it's open to the public. So the students are there to hear those testimonials.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, anyone from the public can attend as well.
Well, let's go through. I mean, some of these have been fantastic, and you mentioned I've been. It's a privilege, obviously, to be
Yeah,
able to present. I had a chance to present a couple of these, and as we go through the list, I want people to know who's on the Hall of Fame, and
sure.
we're not going to give we're not going to go bios on all these, but some of these really just popped out to me, and really it surprised me, or just I was really impressed and glad that. And another reason, boy, this is great that we have this Hall of Fame, because we learned about
Sure.
this person. And we're going to start back in 2018. Robert Himes III in Ala Fever. Ala Fever, longtime head coach for the Raiders in football, basketball, everything. His name is well known in the area. But this Robert Himes III, John, and
Right.
a decorated police officer in Baltimore, right?
Yes, he's probably the most decorated police officer in the country. He's in the Baltimore Police Force. He's also a SWAT instructor in Baltimore. he has been involved in more drug busts than you can imagine. And some of them really got national news.
Right.
There was a time when Baltimore had some really bad inner city problems, and he was involved. He was in the heat of that. He's put his
Hmm.
life on the line so many times, and he's really the ultimate police officer. He's been decorated with so many awards, and he's a wonderful human being to boot.
And that was a revelation to me. A lot of people
Yes.
know who Al was, but this Hall of Fame has brought other people to the forefront, and that's what's so cool. 2019, James Calder, Kate Hines, Tina Nabachi, Nathan Smith. Obviously, I had a lot to do. Well, I presented Nathan. I've had to spend a lot of time with him and covering Kate Hines as well. Give me a quick rundown on the other two, John.
Okay, James Calder is a financial person,
Right.
very, very, very big at Penn State. He's retired now, but he's a very successful in the financial industry. He had his own business, and he was actually the first person to start a scholarship fund at Brookville High School
Okay.
for individual students that they could
That's right.
take advantage of. Yes. And who was the other person?
Tina Nabachi.
Tina. Tina Nabachi is a professor at Syracuse University, and she is one of the leading experts in the country in conflict resolution,
Hmm.
which is a really interesting thing. So she's actually gone and worked with other countries in particular to not only works domestically with individual organizations, but
Right.
she's gone to other countries that have had political strife
Right.
and human rights issues. And she has worked with individuals there through her platform for conflict resolution.
Class of 2020, Colonel James Harding, Bill Kutz, Dr. Carl Nolf, and David Taylor. Dave was very active in the downtown revitalization. Just a very, he's so proud of his community. I think that's what
Yes,
jumps out to me when we talk about Dave. Dr. Carl Nolf, he's the kidney doctor, right? That was
that that's correct.
give me a little bit on
He,
him, and then we'll go to the other two because I think everybody. Well, Bill Cook's a longtime teacher, and then
sure.
Colonel Harding. My goodness.
Yes, I know.
Go ahead. Let's talk about Carl Nolf quickly first.
Carl
He was
Nolf
a
was,
head of his class in his field.
yes, he was the valedictorian of his class at Brookville. And then he went to medical school. He became his specialty is nephrology, which is the study and treatment of kidney disease. And he was for many, many years before he passed away. He taught at the University of Missouri, and they have a medical school there. He was part of the faculty, and he actually is the forerunner in terms of his research in developing what is today considered the common practice for the treatment of kidney disease. And yet he was a Brookville
Yeah.
graduate,
Yeah.
and his name is on the nephrology unit at the University of Missouri Medical School. It's named after him.
Brookville graduate.
Yeah.
My story of Colonel Harding and Jim and I have talked since. I did a lot of research, did some feature stories on him. I introduced him that night where he was at the football game, which was one of the great moments that I've experienced with this
Oh,
Hall of
sure.
Fame theme. And he's one of the most decorated soldiers in U.S. history. And I believe he just had a podcast that I'm going to publicize. They celebrated him down near in his home where he lives. I'm anxious to listen to it when it does get published. But supposedly there was a podcast there. Bill Kutz, a longtime teacher as well. Just another great class. Let's move to 2021.
Sure.
Dick Boley, Robert Pence, Dr. Uma Chapipurni. Dick Boley, from the sports end, he was a fantastic quarterback in the late 60s for Brookville. And he wrote a book after he's a cancer survivor. He got through
Yes.
leukemia. His brother Dan was another Brookville grad, was a donate. One of the favorite stories that I've ever written. I called it, I think, Blood Brothers. Yeah, that's
Yes.
pretty good, pretty appropriate. But Dr. Pence, or no, Robert Pence and Dr. Chapa Purney, John, those are two that you just, boy, that's impressive. Two more, like you
Yes.
just explained. Give me a little rundown on those two.
Okay, Robert Pence, he's a retired FBI agent. His entire career, he worked for the FBI, and he was the agent in charge at two major metropolitan areas in New Orleans, and then he went to Denver, which is where he lives now. And he handled many, many cases that involved, nationally known. He wrote a book, a best-selling
Yeah.
book,
Yeah.
about his experience in the FBI, and the theme of that book is a little bit about how you never want to mess with politics, especially if you're working for the FBI. And we know that sometimes there's like a thin line of that. Sometimes that could happen. But anyway, in New Orleans, he dealt with the Ku Klux Klan and the
Right.
infiltration down in the South at the early days. And then in Denver, he also worked on the John Benet Ramsey case as
Right.
part of the agent in charge there. So very accomplished person. And then Dr. Uma Chapa Purney, of course, a lot of folks in Brookville would remember her father,
Right.
who was a longtime successful surgeon here in Brookville. Well,
Right.
Dr. Purney is works at the Cleveland Clinic, and that's also her dad now lives very close
Right.
to her in the Cleveland area, and she is a gynecologist,
Right.
and she has done groundbreaking work, and was the first physician to do a transplant of a uterus into another woman. And these are women most of the time that are trying to have children. And she followed up with that successful transplant. And the next one that she did allowed the woman that received the new uterus to have children. So, I mean, that's just amazing. From
And
Little
that's a hall.
Brookville.
That's a Hall of Fame resume, as we've
Yes,
repeated here. That's the very familiar theme. A class of
yes,
22, class of 2022. A relative of mine, I called him Uncle John, John DeMott, a longtime business owner at Demands. He was a business leader, civic leader for a long time in Brookville.
yes,
Uh, Charles Andy Hastings and Rhonda Mays. Now Hastings was one that I presented. And the weird thing there, he was clearly, obviously worth a Hall of Fame mention, but no family. So I have the plaque, and I'm really proud to have it, John. And if there's
absolutely.
a family member that wants it, I would gladly, you know what I mean? These
Yes,
plaques there's also a plaque at the school. People can see this at the
yes,
lobby. But
yes,
Rhonda Mays is another international star, we'll call her here,
yes,
because of
exactly right.
her work. Talk about her for a minute.
Yes, well, she works for a national organization. Um, I believe she may still be there. I'm not sure, but I think it's called the National Republican Institute in DC. And what they do is they go out, somewhat like in conflict resolution, similar to Tina Nabachi, but they work in foreign countries to help, especially with women, women that are don't have the same privileges that they would women have in the United States,
Right.
and and not just women but others where they're in countries that have political strife
Right.
and have no rights whatsoever. And she goes in there, and I think she is based in Southeast Asia. She lives well, at least she did live. I don't know if she's still living there in Indonesia.
Right.
So she basically spent many years in Indonesia working with the population there to better the lives of these individuals.
That's yeah. You wrap your mind around some of the accomplishments of these Hall of Famers. It's just so impressive.
Yes,
Class of
yes,
20, class of 23 includes some familiar faces and names for especially for longtime students or graduates of Brookville. John Grotenthaler, superintendent for many years. And boy was he had a great his speech was really. I mean he's up there in age. Let's say that he's in
yes,
his 90s, I believe, doing very well. He was just so vibrant at the podium. Larry McManigal, a longtime teacher and coach at Brookville. He's the all-time winningest basketball coach at Brookville. Ken Burkett, who is still active doing stuff. You can drop a little bit on him, and then
Yeah.
I'll kick it to you after we talk about Chuck Taylor. Chuck Taylor is the father of David Taylor, and we'll get to another Taylor here in a minute. But Chuck was just an outstanding athlete in the early days. So Andy Hastings was a little older than him. Chuck Taylor was real close to going to the Olympics in 24. He was a standout athlete, but then he became a civic leader and a community leader and business leader in Brookville for many years. But Ken Burkett, he is active doing what, John? What's his?
He's an archaeologist by
Yeah.
trade, and he was the longtime executive director of the Brookville Area Historical Society, and he has done so much in Brookville. His knowledge of archaeology, he worked with the Carnegie Museum down in Pittsburgh. He was responsible for starting the Scripture Rocks park that we have here in Brookville, and he has done so much in terms of making people aware of archaeological digs, and he's a real historian. So he's a great person to have on our Hall of Fame without question.
Very much so. Class of 24, one guy, and I tell you what, the auditorium was electric because everybody kind of knew who Thad Turner was. And then we found out a lot more, and his involvement from the Association for the Recovery of Children. I had a chance to sit down with him for a couple hours, and he told some stories that may not have, didn't really make print. Some of his adventures and just some of his things. What struck you from that presentation he made when he was named to the Hall of Fame? He was a state runner-up in wrestling. Let's start there. But he's currently the executive director at Warren YMCA. Right. But he's also going abroad still, saving children, John.
Saving children.
How amazing is this guy?
Just amazing, and often just like when he was a Navy SEAL, which was part of his previous background, he puts his life on the line. He works with others in going into countries that most people would not even think about going to or can't even go to. In fact, he told me the other day that sometimes there's countries he has to go to that he cannot fly into. He has to go to another country, and they have to figure out a way to get from that country to where he's ultimately going to go. But they do. He takes that Navy SEAL background, and he knows it's all planned out where these children are that were kidnapped, and Lord knows what's been done to those children, and he brings them back to where they rightly belong before they were kidnapped. And he does this all the time in some of the countries we wouldn't even think of going to.
Well, you think the worst places to be in the world, Thad has been there.
Yes, absolutely has.
And most of the time it's stealth and there's no confrontation, which is even more amazing.
It's
last
amazing.
Last year's class was the first time I was unable to attend, and obviously a few that I'm very familiar with. Bob Tonkin, longtime athletic director, just so much a factor in PIAA statewide policy making, and just at the school at District 9 level. Sean Taylor, which is the grandson of David and I guess the great grandson of Chuck Taylor. He had a tremendous music. He has a tremendous music background. I'll let you get into him a little bit. Becky Aikman, I read her book Spitfire. I just finished it here not that long ago. Excellent research. I just love fiction and or nonfiction. I love nonfiction, and she nailed it. She nailed it there. And Colonel Nick Ondrasik, who I covered playing basketball in Brookville during his high school days. Start with Sean, and then take me through Aikman and Ondrasik quick before we wrap it up.
Okay, sure. Sean is a professor of music. He's now a full professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande, which is in Brownsville, Texas. And he is accomplished. He not only conducts orchestras, not only at the school but also in the community. But he has written music and published it, and he's a member of these very famous choirs. Like there's a Berkshire choral group, up in I believe in New England, that is very prestigious, and he is now the director of that choral society. So he gets asked to perform and conduct all across the country. And of course, his wife is also a music teacher, so good for them. They get to be together, in Texas, and a lot of common interests. But also, he comes back every year in the summertime. He was just here, and
Right.
he has his own musical group that does a cappella, and they perform in Brookville, either at the church or at
Yep.
some venue in Brookville.
Right.
And so, yeah, very much accomplished.
And
And
then
let's see.
yeah, Becky Aikman.
Becky Aikman. Becky Aikman, a lot of people don't know, but before she became an author, she worked with some very prestigious magazines in New York. U.S. News and World Report is just one. She was a writer and a journalist for those magazines, and then decided to branch out on her own and become an author. And
Hmm.
her first book was, I'm trying to remember the name, but she had a group with other. Um, they were divorcees, and they would
Yes.
meet regularly. And they decided she decided all the stories that they could talk about that helped other people that are maybe going through
Yeah.
conflicts in their marriages. And it was a very well accepted book. And the second one was the one that she did following the very successful movie Thelma and Louise.
That's right.
If you notice, that was a kind of a groundbreaking movie
Yeah.
where women were the heroines, even though they were like evading the law. They ended up escaping the law and taking it into their own hands. And she wrote a book based on how that movie came about.
Right. Right.
And then the most recent is
Right.
Spitfires, which
Right.
is about famous women
Right.
who were pilots during World War II. And she's
And-
gotten in touch with their families, and
yeah.
yeah, they're sort of forgotten, you know,
Yeah.
today.
Well, I just one thing real quick. The fact that these women kept diaries made that book possible, and it just
Yes,
very impressive. And then obviously Becky found that information and turned it into a really nice book. And then Colonel Nick Ondrasik, some
Colonel
great
Nick
work that he's
Andrasik.
done.
Yes. Well, first of all, to be a colonel and a medical doctor is pretty impressive to begin
Right.
with. He's a colonel because he's been in with the Army Reserves. He's based in Rhode Island right now, and he actually heads the Army Reserve unit in Rhode Island there. And he's a doctor. He's a, I believe, not, he's a urologist. Okay, and he his specialty. He also has done this volunteer work with an organization that works with children that are medically and mentally challenged,
Right.
and he actually has he and his wife have a child that has handicapped issues, and
Okay.
so that gave him the inspiration to work with others as well. So he gives a lot back to his community in Rhode Island that way, and just very accomplished.
John, appreciate all the work this committee has done. The Brookville Hall of Fame committee, you're the chairman. Your enthusiasm, it's hard not to get excited about these events and honoring just all kinds of people that have really given their life to excellence in different fields. I mean, all over the
Thanks,
place.
Rich.
Once again, sum this up. Go to BASD.us, search for Hall of Fame, and it's all there. I'm gonna probably on the crawler when I get done during this speech during this, I'm gonna put some of that on there, so it should be there available. People can see that, and we'll circulate this through social media. I'm anxious to see what turns out this fall, and I'm not going to miss two in a row, so I'm going to try to
No,
make this
no,
one.
no, no. Each one is special. is really special. And each one gets better, especially after we were able to start doing it in the school during the school
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
You know, the kids really have really gotten a lot out of it
Sure.
watching. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks, John, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what the class of 26 comes up. That'll be announced when?
Oh, that's good that you asked that. We generally, shortly after the deadline, which is August 1st, our committee then meets. I send the nominations out to each committee member. We review them and rank them, and then we get together for a meeting. And then we basically calculate our results and decide who is worthy to be in the current class. And then right after that, there's an announcement, a news release that goes out to the media and the
Yep.
public.
Yep,
Yeah.
that'll be in the Jeffersonian Democrat mid-August somewhere in there, and I'll be
Yes.
looking forward to seeing that. I usually work with you on that,
Right.
and once again, good work to the committee, you on publicizing it, and it was certainly a pleasure to talk about it here today.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for doing this, Rich. I really appreciate it.